Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jarrett, and I'm here to answer all your questions about politics, be they simple or complicated. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the show where you can ask all your questions about politics. Nobody's going to judge you or roast you or make fun of you or try to debate you. I don't believe in debates. I don't think that they are productive, and so I will not be debating anybody here on my live stream. So you don't have to worry that you're going to get debated when you ask any kind of question that you like. So throw your questions in the chat and we will get to answering them. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, or something on the outskirts. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to harass or roast or debate or anything like that. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. Tommy says, "Hi, are you from Israel?" No, I am not. Born and raised in USA. F asks, "Are you right or left?" I am left. What is up, JP? Have you read The Birthright Citizenship Dissent? I haven't. I was listening to my favorite legal podcast, Strict Scrutiny. They released 2 episodes on Monday, and I'm sure there's another episode coming down the pike based on the birthright citizenship case. But it really is bananas that that decision was not unanimous. Tommy says, "What do you think about Jack Schlossberg?" I actually don't remember who Jack Schlossberg is. Ed says, "Do you think Russia would be in the World Cup?" I mean, yeah, if they weren't invading another country, another sovereign nation, then I don't see why not. I think that keeping Russian citizens from participating in global sporting events is a good way of sort of like collectively punishizing the Russian citizenry because it doesn't really have any like substantive. We're not keeping them from getting fresh water or food or anything like that. My story says, "Do you think Israel controls the USA?" No, Israel does not control the USA. It has a lot of influence over the USA for a bunch of different reasons. Some of it are, military strategy. Some of it are, religious extremists. Some of it just financial. But there are other right-wing organizations that also have a lot of influence over the American government. Anybody that has a lot of money has a lot of influence over the American government. And boy, oh boy, did the United States Supreme Court just make that easier. Mikhail Meme asks, "Thoughts on Tucker Carlson?" Tucker Carlson is a liar and a con artist. Right now, he is kind of making a he's trying to create this image of himself being a populist, being an economic populist. I am worried that it will work, but I just hope that everybody remembers that this is a dude who got fired from Fox News and cost them $1 billion because he was knowingly lying to people about Dominion voting machines. And so if that dude was that cool with lying then, just imagine how cool he is with lying now. Okay, let's see here. Horn Dog says, "Are you a Zionist?" I guess I would ask you to define what a Zionist is, Horn Dog. Lost Convict, great to see you again, says, "Is Mitch McConnell alive?" That is an excellent question. I don't know if he's been alive for the last 5 years legally. But yeah, the yeah, it is really shitty that so many of our elected leaders are so old that they could potentially be taking medication for Alzheimer's and dementia and potentially just be living at the hospital and we would have no fucking idea. Semil says, "Do you love communism?" I mean, I love employee-owned companies. Is that what you're asking, Semil? Okay, excellent start to the day, everybody. My name is Jarrett Berenstein, and I'm here to answer all your questions about politics. So throw your questions in the chat, and we will get to answering them. Gian asks, "Is there any chance for America to adopt a multi-party system?" Yes, but in order to do that, we would need to have ranked choice voting, because that's the only way that you can have other parties be included in the electoral process and not be spoiler candidates. The Democratic Party is down with ranked choice voting. The Republican Party is not. So if you want the political process in America to be open to other parties, you got to vote for Democrats. Semil says, "Would you want communism in Europe?" I mean, I think that employee-owned companies are great everywhere, whether they are in America or Canada or Norway, wherever, I'm down, man. Right now, what we have is a parasitic billionaire class that is sucking up all of the profits from our labors. And I do not believe that that is a sustainable or just or moral system. What is up, Mike Green? Yes, Jarrett is on indeed. Welcome, everybody. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, some in the middle, or some on the outskirts. I don't judge, I don't harass, I don't bully, and I don't debate. House says Democrats using sock puppets and protesting algae will do wonders for connecting with the people. Seems like you're being sarcastic there, House. Is your main issue with the government that the Democrats are trying to communicate with people about how awful the Trump administration is, and one example is the reflecting pool? Are you more upset about that than you are about Trump stealing money from American taxpayers? Ed says, do you believe in abortions being necessary for life? I mean, that's not a belief thing. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. There are certain medical conditions that require an abortion for the woman who is currently pregnant to be able to survive and protect her fertility. Horn Dog says, should Israel be a Jewish state with illegal occupation or a state with equal rights for all? It should be a state with equal rights for all. I don't know what you mean. What illegal occupation? Do you believe that the people who are currently living in Israel are illegally occupying Israel? Because I'm down with saying that Israel should not be annexing territory in the West Bank or in Gaza. But I also think that the citizens who are currently living in Israel probably should be able to stay there. Car 4 News says, how to start politics as a 16-year-old participant in the student council of the municipality. I mean, I don't know what the rules are for your municipality about how old you have to be, but, if you go to meetings, I'm sure that there are ways that you can get involved. House says they can't communicate, LOL. So that's not a question, House. You either ask a question or I'm going to boot you. Alex says, are you from the U.S.? Yes, I am. Andre says, thoughts on the Philippines? I have no thoughts on the Philippines. Don't know anything about it. Tommy says, why don't you answer me? Because I didn't see a question. Shell Bell says, is it me or is the volume very low on this channel? Can anybody else confirm or deny what Shell Bell is saying? I am happy to bump up my volume. Alex says, do you support Trump? No, I do not. Corn Dog said, should only Jews be able to move to Israel or should the same right be given to Palestinians? Anybody should be able to move to Israel. I believe in immigration. I believe that immigrants are net positive. So the same way that I think that you should be able to move to France or Germany or America, I think you should be able to move into Israel. Okay, Lucas Hagan says, what do you think of El Salvador? I mean, I worry about the people of El Salvador. The government is tyrannical, and, that whole CCOT business is pretty upsetting. I don't think that any country should have a torture prison. Okay, Alex says, what do you think about ICE? ICE is an illegal rogue agency behaving immorally, illegally, unconstitutionally. I have nothing nice to say about ICE. DJD says, do you think trans women are real women? Yeah, why not? Doesn't really affect me. James Cassidy says, what do you think about Derry? The town in all the Stephen King novels? Horn Dog says, right now a Jew can move to Israel without connections to the land, but refugees can't. Well, I don't endorse that, Horn Dog. I don't care for that at all. Grace says, Opus Dei, Leonard paid Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas to overturn Roe versus Wade prison time. Opus Dei, Leonard Leo paid the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas to overturn Roe versus Wade prison time. I don't know what the prison time means there. Alex says, what do you think about communism? I like workers owning the means of production. I'm down for that. James Cassidy says, no, LL, Derry, London, Derry, and Ireland. Oh, I know absolutely nothing about Ireland. What is up, Triska? Great to see you again. Mikhail Meme says, thoughts on nationalism. Nationalism feels like the evil twin of patriotism. Like, it's not just about, is nationalism feels like you're like not only loving your country, but like saying that every other country is worse than your country, which I just think is kind of a toxic mentality. Why can't we all agree that all countries have like some good and negative qualities? Mikhail Meme asked, did Biden tax the rich? Yes, but not enough. And mostly that was not his fault. He had a divided Congress, and so his ability to raise taxes on the wealthy was limited. DJ says, are you left or right? I am left. Grace says, Google Leonard Leo, Opus Dei, paid subpoena. Okay, I will. Well, if you really want me to Google that, you have to send me a DM or I will forget as soon as the live is over. Horn Dog says, should the UN sanction Israel until it guarantees equal rights for all? I have exactly zero problem with that, Horn Dog. I am completely unaware of what the UN has actually done to punish Israel for their war crimes, but I believe that something is necessary. Okay, Gecko says, do you believe American colonial actions globally warrant reparations to be paid to those impacted? I mean, yeah, generally speaking, I think the devil's in the detail. Mikhail Meme says, what is the filibuster? The filibuster is a mechanism by which, so Congress in America is separated into two different houses. There's the House and the Senate. And they both have like different legislative maneuvers and things like that, and different priorities and things that they control. They both have different committees that can do investigations and stuff like that. So there are differences between the two houses. One of the mechanisms that the Senate has for actually passing a bill is called the filibuster, where if you don't like the bill that is currently up for a vote, you can filibuster it, which means that it would need 60 votes to pass instead of 50 votes. Basically, the filibuster says that as long as I am filibustering, no other things can happen in the Senate. All businesses is put to a halt until either my filibuster goes away or this bill goes away. And there are a lot of issues that I have with the filibuster. It used to be harder, now it's not. That's the short version. Gecko says, "What's the difference between liberalism and socialism?" I mean, I guess that socialism could be viewed as an economic model, where I think liberalism is much more of a political philosophy. Elliot says, "Thoughts on the Cuba blockade?" I mean, I don't think that we should be inflicting collective punishment on the citizens of Cuba. That doesn't really seem like a nice or moral thing to do, and it also seems like it's going to bite us in the ass in the long run. Because instead of people being mad at their own government and trying to change their own government, now they're mad at America. Now America is the bad guy. Lucas Hagen says, thoughts on Bitcoin and the decentralization of money. I have not heard a good use case for Bitcoin besides speculation and crime, so I will be happy if all cryptocurrency goes to zero. I've got exactly zero dog in that fight. M says, do you think socialism could take power in the USA? I mean, I guess it depends on how you define socialism. I think that we are moving closer to more essential industries becoming socialized, like healthcare, and paying for it by taxing the rich and like having a much more populist economic model where there isn't such unbelievable income inequality. And it is the left wing of the Democratic Party that is accomplishing that. And the moderate Dems are kind of on board with it, depending on which one you ask. Some of them are staunchly against it, but most of them are just like trying to pump the brakes on it or water it down a little bit. Whereas the Republican Party is like fully against it and are like, we will do everything in our power to do the opposite of that. We want to get rid of Medicare and Medicaid. We want to get rid of all government programs. We want everything just to be free market, and we want to live under the aristocracy of the billionaire class. So, yeah, Democrats are the way that we are going to have a better country. Horn Dog says, do you believe Israel is committing genocide? So I don't think that genocide is the sort of thing that we need to have personal opinions on. Like, there are experts in what is or isn't a genocide. And the experts have concluded that what Israel is doing is a genocide. Or I should clarify that it is the Netanyahu government specifically is doing the genocide. Even independent organizations within Israel have concluded that it's a genocide. So, as a non-expert in what is or isn't a genocide, I believe in the experts, Diego Vargas, great to see you again. Says, we need some serious reforms to prevent other Trump-like figures taking advantage of the government. Completely agree with that. And we're not going to get that unless we get Democrats in office. Log asks, thoughts on AIPAC politicians. So I think that there's a difference between certain politicians who take money from AIPAC. Log, I don't think it's a binary. I don't think you're either a politician that takes money from AIPAC or a politician that doesn't take money from AIPAC. There are certain politicians that take money from AIPAC but are willing to stand up to AIPAC and the Netanyahu government and not appear to be a shill of the Israelis. And then there are people who take AIPAC money and are fully on board with the project of AIPAC and the Netanyahu organization. So I think the devil's in the details there. You really have to. I don't think that we can use that as a litmus test for our politicians. Now, if I'm being asked in a primary election to decide between two different Democrats, one of them takes AIPAC money and the other one doesn't, my vote is most likely going to go to the one that doesn't take AIPAC money. But if it's a general election between a Democrat that takes AIPAC money and a Republican that takes AIPAC money, I'm voting for the Democrat. Because if you're looking for the politicians that are standing up to Israel, they are all in the Democratic Party. Like 100% of those politicians are Democrats. John Scarp says, thoughts on men playing in women's sports? I don't care, John Scarp. I do not care if men play in women's sports. I think that there are some men like myself who are really bad at sports, who women would just fucking kick our ass left and right. So, I think we should have leagues based on talent and not divided by sex. And then we can end this whole charade of people giving a shit about this issue as a mechanism of hurting the trans community. Horn Dog says, stop saying it's only Netanyahu. Israel have had this policy in occupation since 1948. Well, currently it's the Netanyahu government. I don't believe in collective punishment, Horn Dog. I don't believe in blaming the voters for the things that the government is doing. Rye Guy says that's why the funding Israel has been bipartisan for decades. I mean, you misspelled bipartisan, buddy. But yeah, the Democratic Party is the party that is standing up to Israel. So I'm going to vote for Democrats going forward. Okay, Mikhail Meme says, did you know that IKEA, Spotify, H&M, Minecraft, Dynamite, Nobel Prize, and Volvo is all Swedish? I did know that, Mikhail Meme. JR says, who would you vote for in the UK? It really doesn't matter because I'm an American, but I can only tell you I would never vote Reform, I would never vote Restore, I would never vote Tory, never vote for Nigel Farage. All right, Cracky says, is there a feasible way for the U.S. to actually recover from the damage that's been done by Republicans? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like the speed with which we will be able to recover from the damage that Trump and the Republican Party have done to this country and world is based entirely on how many Democrats we can get into government, how many Republicans we can get out of government by unelecting them, of course, or impeaching them, putting them in jail where they belong, some of them. And also how much work we as citizens do, because sometimes Democratic politicians also don't do the best thing, and we have to be able to protest and strike and boycott and put political pressure on them to make sure that they know what our priorities are. And we need American citizens to be knowledgeable about what their government is doing. We need to be fighting back against misinformation and propaganda on social media channels and on right-wing media news channels like Fox and OAN and Breitbart and Daily Wire and shit like that. If we can do that, then we can recover a lot quicker. But anytime the Democratic Party has even a little bit of political power, America tends to believe that the Democrats are responsible for all their ills, and that's the reason why they tend to lose more elections than they should. We have this weird sort of like philosophy around the Democratic Party in America where they have to be perfect, but the Republican Party just has to be slightly above evil sometimes. They can go below evil, they can go like eviler than evil. So long as they dip above evil sometimes, then America is fine with that usually. All right. Mama K Banana says, do you think Trump had this attack on Iran planned with Israel since his first term? No, I do not. I think that Netanyahu and Lindsey Graham started talking him into it during his second term. Horn Dog says, please name me one Israeli political party and prime minister who have not supported annexation. I can't, Horn Dog. I am not an expert in Israeli politics. Lena Lou Whimsy says, at what point are U.S. citizens going to admit the duopoly is controlled by oligarchy? It is inaccurate, Lena Lou Whimsy, to say that both parties are equally controlled by the billionaire class. If you would like me to go into more detail on that, I am happy to. Okay, Jerry Lull says, do you think the new right-wing trend in Europe and America will bring back fascism? So I don't, and I'll tell you why. Because it's been going on since about 2015-ish, depending on which country you're talking about specifically. It's been going on around then, so like about a decade. And I believe that the world is kind of waking up to what is a very inorganic trend. Like this lean towards the right that a lot of countries are experiencing is based off of a campaign by the billionaire class, a global campaign by the billionaire class and autocracies to convince people that that is the best way to do it. And I think that people are recognizing that. I think that people are becoming more skeptical of things they see on the internet. I think that people are recognizing that political parties that blame immigrants for problems that are caused by the billionaire class that would actually help. So we still have a lot of work to do because they have a lot of money and power still and influence. And so I can't tell you that it's definitely going to go back in the other direction. But I think that I would not be surprised if this was the high watermark for the trend towards the right, the global trend towards the right that we've seen over the past 10 years. Rem V and Muzz King, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. D says, what does the abbreviation GOP stand for? Gross old party, Grio party, geriatric old party. I mean, there are a significant number of extremely old people in the Democratic Party as well, so I don't know if it would be fair to say geriatric old party, but definitely greedy and definitely gross. Vaga War Productions, great to see you again. How can progressives reconcile about agreeing with billionaires on immigration? Can you expand on that? Because I don't know that that progressives do agree with billionaires on immigration. Fargo War Productions. Yeah. Paul asks, which candidate for France? I have no idea. Blue Bear says stands on Cyprus issue. No, I don't know anything about Cyprus issue. Lena says, you can just say, Lena, please explain why the billionaires don't control both parties equally. No, because I don't need you to explain, Lena. I know how the parties are not both controlled by the billionaire class equally. If you would like me to explain that to you, I'm happy to. But if you refuse to believe it, then I guess you can leave, because I don't really vibe with the both sides argument. I think it's a fallacy created by the billionaire class to get people to not vote. And unless you're willing to engage in good faith on that issue, then I will have to believe that you are just a paid tool of the billionaire class trying to spread that narrative. Right, scrolling down to the bottom. Fog of War Production says Elon Musk is a huge fan of the H-1B visa program. Okay, Fog of War. You know, this is interesting. This is interesting because I do think that there are some billionaires that recognize the value of immigrant labor, specifically, um, high skill immigrant labor. But I think that there's a difference between that and the progressive view that immigrants are a net positive wherever they go because they commit crimes at lower rates and they do jobs that Americans don't want to do, and they pay more in taxes than they take out in social services. Yeah, where the issue of immigrants taking jobs from Americans, like, I don't know. I guess I don't really vibe with that argument because if we really gave a shit about that, maybe we could pass some legislation to make sure that immigrant labor can't undercut American labor. But if we're talking about something different, like, let's get into it. You know how much I appreciate your feedback and your engagement. All right, Finn says, who are you voting for? Democrats up and down the ballot. JRGB says, why would you not vote reform or conservative? I don't believe in right-wing politics. They have never worked. Cutting taxes for the wealthy doesn't trickle down. Immigrants are not the cause of all problems. Billionaires are. So, I'm not going to vote for a party that's trying to defund, government programs like the National Institute of Health and shit like that. Finn Tank says, right-wing politics is brain dead. I generally agree with that. Horn Dog says, Democrats are literally also right-wing. That is inaccurate, Horn Dog. If you were looking for people who are left-wing in America, they are all in the Democratic Party. Elected leaders is what I'm talking about. Paul says, do you think the Electoral College should be abolished? Yes, 100%. The Electoral College makes it so that not everybody's vote is equal. The Electoral College says that if you live in a deeply blue state and you're a Republican, then your vote for president gets thrown in the garbage. And if you are a Democrat in a deeply red state, your vote for president gets thrown in the garbage. And because of the way that electoral votes are sort of like, divided up, if you are somebody who lives in Wyoming, your vote for president counts like 3 times what a person in California's vote for president means. And I don't think that is a fair or just system. I think that people who are running for president should go to every state and not just the 10 swing states. Okay, Fintan says, anyone who is right-wing tend to be uneducated or rich. Statistically, that's generally pretty accurate. But I don't want people to think that uneducated is a pejorative. It literally a statistical fact that if you did not graduate from college or you did not graduate from high school, you tend to be right-wing. All right, Lena Loomsy says, LOL, there are no leftist parties in the U.S. There are liberals, which is not the same. That is inaccurate. There are left-wing politicians like Mamdani and Bernie Sanders and James Tallarico and Andy Bashir and Chris Murphy and I forget if I said AOC already, but yeah, and they're all Democrats. So I don't really know what you're trying to get at here, Lena. Josh says, thoughts on Kavanaugh's dissent in Barbara today. Do you refresh my memory which one's Barbara, Josh? Lena Lou Whimsy says, he is DSA. All right, that's still a Democrat, though. Like, if you're caucusing with the Democrats, if you're running on the Democratic ticket, if you're winning a Democratic primary, then you're a Democrat. All right, Horn Dog says, the right-wing parties in Scandinavia are more left than Democrats. Again, I disagree. This person emoji says, wait, who'd you vote for? Democrats up and on the ballot. Jerry Lowell says, do you think worker communes like there was in Paris or Soviet Union are better than parties? I don't know. I've never heard about worker communes. Okay. Beaverino, nice to see you as well. Horn Dog says, why doesn't the Democrats support Zohran Mamdani then? They do. It is true that leadership does not support Mamdani as much as they should, but the Democratic Party in general supports Zohran Mamdani. The politicians who support Zohran Mamdani are all in the Democratic Party. This is a rhetorical device that people try to use to smear the Democratic Party, where they'll say, if 100% of Democrats don't do X, that means that none of the Democrats do X. So, for example, some Democrats still believe in sending money and weapons to Israel. Therefore, all Democrats still believe in sending money and weapons to Israel, when the opposite is true, that the only politicians who are voting against sending money and weapons to Israel are in the Democratic Party. The only elected politicians that support the far left are in the Democratic Party. So if you're looking for elected Democrats that love and support people like Zohran and AOC and Bernie Sanders, they're all in the Democratic Party. There's none of those. Mitch McConnell ain't doing that shit. Mike Johnson ain't doing that shit. Lindsey Graham ain't doing that shit. This person says, so you support Israel. I mean, at what point did me saying we should not send money and weapons to Israel make it seem like you thought that I supported Israel? Our original Statue of Liberty says Republicans can't win without cheating. There's a fact. That is generally accurate. Horn Dog says, tell me one major Democrat who supports Mamdani all white. All right, AOC, Bernie Sanders, James Tallarico, Andy Bashir, Josh, what's his name? Josh, yeah, I can't remember his last name. Okay, Michael says democratic socialist isn't socialism at all. Okay, if you want to argue semantics, I'm not going to stop you. Average Joe, great to see you again. Was the earlier chatter referring to the party institutions or elected officials? Because the two parties are fundraising institutions. They do both take billionaire donations, while some elected officials do not. Yeah, I mean, this is part of the issue that I have with people smearing the Democratic Party, is they'll take one Democrat and ascribe that characteristic to the entire party. Horn Dog says Gavin Newsom ? I mean, Gavin Newsom has said that he embraces the far left candidates that are winning their primaries. I don't know if it's actually true. I have viewed him as much more of a centrist in the way that he is governed, but he's definitely better than those Democrats that are out there saying they're going to go to war with all these new progressives. Fog War Productions says, I don't think people realize how badly you can exploit immigrant labor. I think that's totally fair, Fog War Productions. Let's see here. This person says, no, I was going through the chats and someone said you do. All right, well, they lied. All right, Newman says, do you support aid to Ukraine? Yes. Do you think we'll ever send more aids? Potentially. It seems like one of the ways in which the Republican Party is down for demanding specific action from the Trump administration is with Ukraine aid. All right, Lena Luinzi says, also, why are we so committed to two parties? Well, the way that electoral politics works in America is it's very difficult for a third party to get any kind of footing without being a spoiler candidate. Now, we could change that if we had ranked choice voting, and the only party that's willing to do that is the Democratic Party. So if you want more than the two main parties, Lena, then you need to vote for Democrats. All right, let's see here. Horn Dog says, you have to understand you can't compare the Democrats to left parties in Scandinavia. Okay, Horn Dog, if you say so. Jerry Lull says, what is the difference between socialists like Lenin and democratic socialists like Mamdani? I got to be honest, I don't know enough about Lenin to compare, but I will say this. I'm pretty sure Lenin did some dictatorship, and I don't believe that democratic socialists like Mamdani are interested in doing dictatorship. Corey Boswell says, percentage of sitting senators who accept AIPAC money. I have no idea. But I can pretty much guarantee you that most of them are in the Republican Party. And the ones that eschew it are all Democrats. I'm pretty confident of that. Fog War Productions says undocumented roughnecks are underpaid, overworked, and don't get workers' comp. That is 100% accurate, Fog War Productions. Now, what I would love to see is some sort of legislation where we actually punish the employers for doing that as opposed to punishing the workers for that. How do you feel about that, Fog War Productions? Original Statue of Liberty says, you don't want to look it up. Don't want to look what up. Horn Dog says, do you want the U.S. to recognize Palestine? Yes. Destin Port says, will more than 50% of his current cabinet flee the country to avoid prison if they lose in 2028? I actually thought that more people in the Trump administration and Trump family were going to dip after his first term because of how many wildly illegal things that he did. Now, what we saw between 2020 and 2024 is how difficult it is to get accountability from people that are that wealthy and that powerful. and have that much political influence. So I think that there will probably be a good number of them who will either try to get preemptive pardons from Trump so they can stay in the country, or they will stay in the country because they just have that belief in their own ability as extremely rich and powerful people to eschew any kind of consequences for the crimes that they've committed. Horn Dog says, how can you say Democrats are left when Biden and Harris supported Israel even during G-side? So, Horn Dog, the issue that I have is, what does it mean to support Israel? Now, let's be real 100% for a hot second, okay? Like, Biden and Harris did not continue sending money and weapons to Israel. Biden did that. That was not a joint decision between him and Harris, you know? Now, if Harris goes out there and says that Israel has a right to exist, that does not necessarily mean that she is going to continue sending them money and weapons. That just means that she believes that the people who are currently living in Israel have the right to stay in Israel. There is something very vague about the phrase supporting Israel that I find lends itself to kind of hyperbolic extremist diatribes where you believe that anybody who could be accused of supporting Israel, however that means, is like an evil and corrupt politician. But let's fucking talk about the details there. Like, do you believe that the people who are currently living in Israel have a right to stay there, but you also believe that we should not be sending them money and weapons because they're committing a genocide? Like, I think that's the correct political position. But does that count as supporting Israel, quote unquote? Does that count as being Zionist? You know, what I find is that there are people on the internet who are desperately trying to paint specific people as evil in the shortest possible semantic trick way. And that is one of them. Do you support Israel? Are you a Zionist? Like, what do these words even mean? Like, how do they redound to actual policy? If I told you that as an elected leader or president, I would stop sending money and weapons to Israel, do you think that I do not support the citizens of Israel anymore? Do you think that I think that Israel should be ethnically cleansed? Alrighty. Let's see here. Whispering Chunk says, thoughts on Nigel Farage? Bad guy, do not vote for. Angelo says, they're hardcore capitalists and don't support any of the workers and want to keep their own wealth. Who, Angelo? Ocho says, direct democracy, question mark? Maybe. Diego Vargas says, if production has increased, why have the wages remained low and not keeping up with cost of living? Well, that all comes down to cutting taxes for the wealthy and allowing the billionaire bosses to take all of the profits from the increased productivity. Okay, Angelo says Dems. No, that is inaccurate. The Democratic Party is not hardcore capitalists that don't support any of the workers and want to keep their own wealth. The Democratic Party is the party that put Lina Khan in charge of the FTC, and Lina Khan was breaking up monopolies. The Democratic Party is the one that created an NLRB that was actually siding with the unions for the first time in a generation. The Democratic Party is the only time a president has walked a picket line with a union. So you can miss me with that shit. Joe Biden negotiated paid sick days for the rail workers union. So you can miss me with that Democrats don't give a shit about the workers. Whispering Chunt says, thoughts on Zia Yusuf? Don't know who that is. Seiko says, water isn't wet. No, it is. By definition, it's wet. It's wet. Egyptima says, what do you think of Adam Al-Kapti? Don't know who that is. Vagor Productions says, I remember an undocumented roughneck breaking his back on the job and not getting workers' comp. Yeah, it's fucking travesty, man. Horn Dog says, during Biden and Harris, the U.S. voted against a ceasefire. Okay, I don't know what you mean to accomplish with that statement, Horn Dog. Okay, let's see here. Diego Vargas says, FDR left rules in place so corporations could spend their profits in expanding bonuses or raises. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the ways that the FDR administration continued to enable the accumulation of wealth by the billionaire classes. Usually we hail him as a progressive hero, but I'm down for reading more about that, Diego Vargas. If you would send me a DM, I would love that. What is that, Ecuadorian? Great to see you again. Mikhail Meme, who would win in a fight, Trump or Biden? Probably Trump. Biden is pretty wayfish these days. Jerry Lowell says, I'm confused. Are Democratic Socialists like Mamdani following Marxist ideas or not? I mean, it depends on what you think those Marxist ideas are, Jerry Lowell, because there's a lot of there's a lot of nitpicking around labels and semantics in political arguments. You know, like the Democratic Socialists in American government, the Mamdanis and the AOCs and the Bernie Sanders, they just think that the rich have too much and the rest of us have too little. Like, that's the shortest way that I could describe their positions. But people still will be like, but are they Marxists? Are they Marxists? And I'm like, I don't care. They believe in climate change and they think the rich and they believe in taxing the rich. So, you know, they have my vote. Horn Dog says you care more about critics of Zionism rather than what Zionism does to Palestinians. You know, Horn Dog, I do not believe that you're here in good faith any longer. Sorry. You either ask a question or you leave. Megalodon Core says Trump bought a stake in companies with tax dollars. This is communist/socialist. That is 100% accurate. Megalodon Core. It is also accurate to say that Donald Trump has been insider trading off of his role as president. It is also true that Donald Trump has been accepting payment from anonymous sources via his crypto coin. It is also true that Donald Trump's kids are profiting from his presidency via investing in companies that get sweetheart deals and no bid contracts with our taxpayer dollars. It is also true that Trump is selling political pardons, which is directly taking money out of Americans' pockets and putting it in his own. Horn Dog says, looking back historically, do you think Zionism have been good to the Middle East and indigenous people? What do you mean by Zionism, Horn Dog? Again, stop using the word Zionism. It is a word that people use that it is flexible enough to mean whatever you want it to mean. So if I tell you I'm an anti-Zionist, then somebody will come out and say, oh, so you don't think that Israel has a right to exist? You think we should ethnically cleanse the people that are living in Israel, the citizens who've done absolutely nothing wrong, the people that Hamas tortured and killed on October 7th? Do you see how we need to be more specific, Horn Dog? Horn Dog says, define Zionism then if you're an expert. All right, I'm done with you, man. See you later. Okay. Lady Lisa says, is Mitch McConnell still alive? I've got no idea. I don't think he's been alive for a long time. All right. Megalodon Core says, neocons is likely better than Zionists. I don't know if I agree with that. Original Statue of Liberty says, you don't want to hear anything the truth about Trump. You just a MAGA. No, that's not true at all. Original Statue of Liberty. Weird that you would take anything that I said today and accuse me of being a MAGA. 549 says, are you an English teacher on YouTube? No, I am not. Average Joe says, would you agree or disagree that the genocide against Palestinians isn't really a single issue because it signals a candidate's humanity and their susceptibility to financial corruption? Why or why not? That is a really good question, Average Joe. But there's some vagaries in there that I think we need to be very specific about. Like, is the value of having access to that region worth it to some politicians to continue sending money and weapons to Israel? Is taking AIPAC money just so that you can win your election against a Republican and be a vote against sending money and weapons signal that you are for genocide? You know, I think we need to be really specific about what it means to be either for or against the genocide, because I think every politician will generally tell you that they're against the genocide. But where the rubber meets the road is in, does this politician say I'm against genocide, but what Israel's doing isn't a genocide, or yes, what Israel's doing is a genocide, but we have to kind of like, you know, make a deal with them so that we can have our military bases there, so that we can bring stability to certain regions, you know, blah blah blah. But yeah, you know, generally speaking, I think that if you can get a politician to, if a politician is willing to acknowledge on record that the Netanyahu government is guilty of war crimes and genocide, that's generally enough for me to say that this is a person who has humanity. Okay, yay, says, what is neo-Marxism? I have no idea. Clean, fresh edits, great to see you again. Should Democrats in purple states and districts refrain from nominating DSA candidates? Ooh, that's a really good question, Clean Fresh Edits. So first thing that we should recognize is that the Democratic Party does not decide who gets the nomination. The voters do. And so if a bunch of Democratic voters in purple states vote for the DSA candidate, then the DSA candidate becomes the nominee. I think that it would be really unwise for the Democratic Party to go against the will of the voters just because candidates are further to the left than they want them to be. Now, is it politically smarter to run a more centrist, moderate Democrat in a purple state or somebody from the far left? My personal belief, and again, nobody knows. Nobody knows the answer to that question. There are a bunch of elections that have been lost by progressive candidates against Republicans, and there have been a bunch of elections that have been lost by moderate candidates against Republicans. So nobody knows the answer to that question. Some pollsters will tell you that it is political suicide to run a progressive in those districts. My personal belief is that is the platform that everybody wants, no matter where you are. They want economic populism. They want universal health care, even if they think they don't. They sometimes they need to be convinced. Sometimes they need to be talked to, and there has to be education happening both ways. Listening and learning and shit like that. But level playing field, everybody wants what the economic populists are delivering in places like New York City. So yeah, that's my personal belief. But again, nobody knows. Nobody knows. Okay, Original Statue of Liberty says, look up the bipartial president historians ranking, please. Why would I do that? Original Statue of Liberty. Megalodon Core says, the fact Mexico recently passed universal health care is a wake-up call to the USA. 100% agree. Fedorosio says, what do you think about Italian politics? I don't know too much about it. I only know that Giorgia Meloni is too far to the right. Cortez says, ask about politics if you like. 312MQ, great to see you again. What do you think of the deal that Israel made with Lebanon to keep all the land they took? So I am unread on that specific issue, 312. If you send me a DM, it will remind me to look it up, and I'll either send you a DM about it, or I can talk about it on the show tomorrow. Okay, Cortez Fortes says, yeah, so you are a government spoker pretending to be from a side or another. I'm not pretending to be anything. I am extremely honest about who I am and what my areas of expertise are. Foghorn Production says, trying to convince my boss I am not high while moving like a bitch for Kyle. Foghorn, I love you being here, Foghorn Productions. Jago Vargas says, I think Susan Collins will finally lose. I think so too. It's kind of neck and neck right now, but I do believe that Plattner has the edge. Mighty Kane says, you think free healthcare is good. I do think universal healthcare is good. David Miller says, true or false, the American people as a whole are smarter than 30 years ago. I don't know, man. We are looking at an illiteracy crisis. We are looking at fewer people graduated from high school being able to read than I don't know when the last time it was that we had as poor literacy as we do now. So yeah, I couldn't tell you. Okay, David Douglas says, what's the health insurance like for being a spoker for the government? I don't know, man. Cortez Fortes says, you are Jewish. Is that a question? Cortez Fortes also says, working for Israeli media warfare. And I think if I was, I would not be as critical of the Netanyahu administration as I am. 312 says, what do you think of justices on their landmark decisions lately? I mean, it's a real fucking shit show, man. Like, it's unfucking believable. Like, they give us birthright citizenship, but they remove campaign contribution limits. Like, they let states decide to count their ballots whenever, but they allow the president to denaturalize anybody that he fucking wants to. Like, it's so fucking psychotic, man. It is unfucking real. Fucking golf clap for them doing the absolute bare fucking minimum of upholding the actual Constitution in certain cases, but goddamn, they are doing everything they can to turn Trump into a dictator, to give him the powers of a dictator or king, man. It's fucking disgusting. And if there's no other reason that you should unelect every Republican and replace them for a Democrat, the shit that the Supreme Court is currently doing should be enough for anybody, And I got people on here arguing about who's better or worse for the people of Palestine. I got people on here who takes more money from billionaires, who does more for the working class, et cetera, et cetera. This Supreme Court has been hijacked by the Republican Party. And the only way that we fix that is if we unelect Republicans and we replace them with Democrats. That is the only way that happens. And there are a million other reasons. And I got people in my chats wanting to split hairs about what it means to be a Democratic Socialist or a moderate or who takes AIPAC money or whatever. The president has a fucking crypto coin. The president destroyed the East Wing of the White House. The president is selling political pardons. His kids are getting no-bid government contracts. And the Republican Party that is in control of both Congress and the White House and the Supreme Court is allowing that to happen. So you can miss me with all of that both sides bullshit. You can miss me with all of your semantic, hair splitting that you want to do. The only solution is to unelect every Republican and replace them with a Democrat. Okay, Cortez Fortes says, listen to the Jew babbling. That is not the kind of comment that I allow on my live stream, man. So you are out of here. He is selling Jewish democracy. Good Lord. Unfucking believable. All right, Average Joe says, that's the financial part. I include congressional stock trading of defense contractors to be corrupt. I completely agree with that, Average Joe, 100%. Oof. Alrighty. David Nitu says, Messi or Ronaldo? I don't know enough about football to comment. Jerry Lowell says, do you think climate change is the biggest problem for humanity? Yes, but I have another bank shot issue, which is billionaires. Because if billionaires did not exist, they would not have the power to force the governments of the world to not do anything about climate change for the last 35 years. So arguably, billionaires are a bigger problem than climate change, and potentially we don't solve climate change until we solve the problem of how much money and power the billionaire class has. Okay, Clean Fresh Edit says, do you like Darializa Avila Chevalier? So, if I'm remembering correctly, Chevalier is one of the progressive leftists that won their primaries in New York City. It is one of the candidates that Zohran Mamdani endorsed, and one of the most sort of left-leaning, tanky, abolish prisons Democrat that kind of has been winning primary elections recently. There are some positions that she has taken that I don't agree with, but I am willing to give her a chance. I think that she has the potential to be an excellent elected leader. I do not believe that she is going to stomp her feet and demand that we close every prison in America. I want to have more progressive members in government, and so I am willing to have people who are further to the left than me in the Democratic Party, the same way that I'm willing to have people who are further to the right than me in the Democratic Party. All right, Eddie M says, why would Kamala Harris be buying beachfront property in California if it is going to be underwater? So I don't know if that's true, Eddie M, but also maybe where she is buying beachfront property is safe. Maybe it's higher up on the flood line or something like that, Eddie M. But yeah, do you really not think that climate change is real, Eddie M? Because I can just look outside and see that it's 1,000 degrees hotter than it used to be. I lived in New York City for 20 years, and there was significantly more snow on the ground during winters in my first year there than in my 20th year there. It's Eddie, can you not see the climate change with your own fucking eyes, my guy? You know that there's 1,000 people dead in France right now because of their unprecedented heat wave, right? I see your LOLs, Eddie, and I'm giving you an opportunity here to engage on the substance instead of trying to get me to fight you. All right, Save the EU says, what do you think with far rights lefts? I don't know what that means, Save EU. Shiva Maharaj 300 says, do you agree or reject the statement that Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal? I agree with that statement. And honestly, I would be suspicious of anybody who rejected that statement, Shiva. It seems like it is so blatantly obvious that Benjamin Netanyahu is guilty of perpetuating a genocide against the people of Palestine. And the softer way of saying that is to say that he is a war criminal. Like, before, there are some people who refuse to admit that it's a genocide who will at least give you that Netanyahu is a war criminal. And so anybody who's like arguing that he's not a war criminal, like, that is sus as hell, man. It's like, is the sky even blue? You know, like, does gravity still work? Okay, Eddie M says, why would insurance companies be insuring properties if they believe they would lose money? I mean, they're not anymore, Eddie M. Like, there is an insurance, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a catastrophe. There is a, fuck, I can't think of the word. But insurance companies are not doing insurance in certain places in Florida and California anymore. Eddie M, were you aware of that? Or were you not aware of that? Let me know. Olivia says, who do you think the best American president was? I have no idea. In my lifetime, I'll give it to Obama. Average Joe says, oh my God, did you really just say tanky? Where did you hear that term being used? I never heard that used until about 3 months ago, and I want to know why it keeps popping up. So I have known about tankies for a long time, Average Joe, and I don't say it as a pejorative. I say it as a descriptor. Like, if there's somebody who's further to the left than me, I might describe that person as a tanky. I know some people use it, derisively. I do not. I use it descriptively. And if people that I'm describing as tankies have an issue with that, then I will stop using that. I have no problem getting that out of my my vocab. Mikhail Meme asks, thoughts on Piers Morgan? A weird right-wing hack, like parading as a newsman. Jerry Lowell says, do you think capitalism is the final system? No, 100% not. David Douglas says, actuary for insurance companies are the ones advising to not insure areas affected by climate. That is 100% accurate. Eddie M, still waiting on you to respond to that. All right, Fogger War Production says, speaking of climate change, I am switching from a grass lawn to a clover lawn. I fucking love that, Fogger War. God damn, that stuff makes me really excited. Like, I want to own a home so I can do shit like that. Okay, Woody says, thoughts on UK's current situation? What do you mean by current situation, Woody? Mikhail, does centrism extremism exist? I mean, I suppose you can do everything too far, even moderation. Zach says, what are you talking about? Piers Morgan is not right-wing. Do you research? No, yeah, he is. If you bring on people like Destiny just so that you could fight with them, then yes, you are right-wing. David Nitu says, do you think world peace can be reached or it's just a dream? It 100% can be reached. If you've ever read, there's a guy named, I think, Steven Pinker or something. He wrote a book called Our Better Angels about how if you look at the history of human violence, there is a drastic and obvious decline to where the ways that we used to torture people in the Middle Ages, like, you can't imagine doing something like that. Like, there was a thing where you would like tie somebody up and put them over a spike, like a sharp spike, so that the person would slowly impale themselves through their rectum until they were dead. And they would do that out in public. Like, you could go watch that happen, like, for fun. That'd be like a fun thing that you could do with the kids. There used to be a thing called bear baiting. That's the thing that they talk about in Shakespeare plays sometimes. And this is a thing where, like, at a fair, you could just like pay money to like hit a bear with a stick, and it would be tied to like a post so it couldn't get you or something like that. Unconscious. We couldn't even imagine doing some shit like that these days. So yeah, the longer that humanity exists, the less violent and shitty we become. Unless we all start drinking lead and we start losing that part of our brain. Okay, Slug832 says, so do you think a world with Israel, we will accomplish world peace or domination? I do not believe that the existence of the nation of Israel means that we cannot have world peace. Archa says, which party do you support? Democrats up and down the ballot. Eddie M says, yes, private insurance companies do insure beachfront properties in below Florida and California. So you're just lying now, Eddie M. Eddie M, you are in question jail. You either ask a question or leave. Archa says, is capitalism best? No. Jago Vargas says, if the Middle East was relatively peaceful under the Ottoman Empire, why did they become independent? I could not begin to tell you anything about the Ottoman Empire, my guy. Mikhail asks, who is harder, Mondani or Trump? You know the answer to that question. Mikhail. The Wasam Ghost says, "Is socialism about culture war and big leftist coalitions?" Um, that I don't know. I don't know how it could be. The Wasam Ghost. I think that if you were looking at the culture war of the Democratic Party, then socialism would be just sort of like the representation of one of those cultures. But I do believe that big leftist coalitions is a smart thing that we should be doing. The same way that that we should have economic populism. Average Joe's is very popular in Destiny's orbit, so my gut tells me its recent resurgence started with him. Yeah, potentially. But you know that I am, you know how I feel about that fellow. I do not endorse everything that he says or does. All right, Eddie M says that's from Google. Congratulations, you are blocked. I do not allow people to do nonsense in bad faith here. Megalodon courses under capitalism. The Resnicks own 80% of California's fresh water supply. Do not love that. Mikhail says, should John Abbott disguise as Greg Abbott to do better stuff in Texas? Mikhail, let's ask real questions. All right, my guy. Megalodon courses. Democratic socialism is the best. Resources should be owned by all. 100% agree. Fletch Lives says, over 99% of scientists believe in climate change. It's crazy to me that people don't believe in climate change. Fletch, I think that everybody does believe in climate change. I think that almost nobody really doesn't believe in climate change. I think people like fighting about it. I think people like spreading lies about it so that billionaires can get away with the shit they're getting away with and Republicans can continue getting elected. But yeah, I've heard too many reports about the Republicans in Congress going out there and giving speeches about how climate change isn't real, and then once the cameras are off, they go up to the Democrats and they go, "Man, we really got to do something about that, right?" B. Holt asks, "Is it bad that I think political parties have ruined America and that we should remove them?" I don't think that political parties are responsible for the ruination of America. B. Holt. I think there's issues with the party system, specifically a party system that locks out other political parties because of the structure of our electoral politics. But I don't believe that it was the political parties or their existence that ruined America. I think the billionaires ruined America. Okay, Muzz King, Fudgems, Tink, and Lady T. Thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. All right, Wasam Ghosts asks, is democratic socialism going to seize the means of production and abolish private property? I do not believe so. From my perspective, the platform of the democratic socialists in America is the rich have too much and the rest of us don't have enough. And so we're going to fix that. Even if there was a massive wave of democratic socialist victories and every single one of them believed in repealing and abolishing private property, I do not believe it would happen. I do not believe that the majority of Americans would be down with that mandate. Zach says, you hate the billionaires who pay practically over 70% of taxes. Make it make sense. Sure, Zach, it's not enough. It's not enough. If we are cutting funding to government programs that help the poor while the rich are getting richer and richer and are flying around on private jets and luxury yachts and owning multiple mega mansions, then they have too much. Zach, they have too much. All right, David Nitu says, do you think Trump means it when he talks about leaving NATA, or is it just bluff? I mean, you can't put anything past Trump. Like the stupidest decision in the world, he will still do, even if it is a massive self-own. Teaserus says, so I am just joining and I am a leftward progressive. Welcome, Teaserus. I gotta tell you, Teaserus, that we're probably about 5 minutes away from ending the show. But you're welcome here. I'm glad to have you. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. So, if you ever want to be here for the whole show, just get here a little earlier. Average Joe says, I skipped one of his questions. Oh, sorry about that. I knew of its existence, but the Cold War's over. There's no doubt it was redeployed recently as an attempt to insinuate the Democratic Socialists as terrorists. Oh, I don't know if I would go that far, Average Joe. I believe that Destiny uses the phrase pejoratively. I do believe that he looks down on people who he would describe as tankies, but I think that using that word to describe democratic socialists as terrorists feels a little bit of a stretch to me. If you were trying to say that it's trying to paint them as communists, I would agree with that. That seems a little bit more accurate and fair to me. All right, ham and cheese sandwiches. If you spend more than 5 minutes a day on politics, I just assume you're really low intelligence. I don't agree with that at all. Ham and cheese sandwich seems kind of mean. What about people that's their job to talk about politics? Do you still think it's low intelligence to talk about the issues that either hurt or help millions and millions of people all around the globe? Or are you just here to start a fight? Diego Vargas says, will Georgia re-elect John Ossoff? I don't know what polling looks like, but he's a very talented politician, so I doubt that he would lose his election. Fago War Production says, as a Californian and Los Angelino, how would you fix the Colorado River Compact? I'm going to be honest with you, Fago War Productions. I don't know what that is, but I will look into it if you send me a DM to remind me, and I will read up on it. Jerry says, why did the U.S. destabilize so many countries? To steal their resources at the behest of the billionaire class. 312MQ says, when did people start loving the rich? I don't get it. 312MQ, this is one of my conspiracy theories, where I'm like, I believe that if you look at movies and television starting around the 1970s and the way that they kind of like lionize the wealthy, like you've got, Arthur, where this billionaire is just, he's just a good-natured alcoholic who's looking for love, and you got TV shows like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous or Cribs, where they're kind of hyping up this sort of like conspicuous consumerism of these people are great for buying these really expensive houses and cars and crazy big beds and shit like that, Entourage, Ballers, like we are only now seeing a reaction to that, where shows like Succession or movies like The Menu or Triangle of Sadness are talking about the flip side of that, about like how shitty the billionaire class is and how largely they are not smarter and better than all of us, Okay, let's see here. Fargo Productions, climate change is putting immense strain on both the river and the compact. Ooh, I gotta give that a Google. Samuel Cian says, are all political ideologies useful depending on a country's state? I gotta be honest, Samuel Cian, I think that if we know the answer, then certain political ideologies are no longer useful. So fascism, we know the answer. We know how that ends up. Not useful. Monarchies, aristocracy, dictatorships, not useful. Not useful. Trickle-down economics, not useful. Deregulation, not useful. So get rid of them. Misogyny, racism, homophobia, not useful. Get rid of them. We know that they're not good, so just get rid of them. Kimberlina says, why is my boomer dad pro-rich people? I mean, probably just drank the Kool-Aid at the right time. Zach says, thoughts on the monarchy in the UK? If you're in the UK and you like the monarchy, then that's your right. I don't know if I would vote to keep sending taxpayer dollars to the monarchy. Okay. David Nitu says, what do you think about right-wing party from Europe voted to send back immigrants? I think it was the wrong move. I think that they will suffer in the long run from that. Yeah, it's a bummer. It's a bummer that rich people convince others that immigrants are the problem, Jerry Lowell says, was the Vietnam War a mistake? Yes, 100%. Triska mentions all the housewives, Kardashians, etc. Yes, thank you for helping me with my thesis, Triska. Okay, everybody. Zach says, issue is there is a fine line to overtaxing billionaires, which gets to the point where they flee. I don't care if they flee, Zach. First of all, they're always threatening to flee. They never do. There's a reason why Fox News' headquarters is New York City, because rich people like living in extremely cool places, even if they get taxed up the wazoo. There's a reason why there are so many billionaires still in California, even though California is taxing billionaires at a higher rate. Additionally, if they do flee, fucking good, go. You can't take all of your resources with you. There are laws about that sort of thing. You know how when you go into another country and you have to declare if you are bringing any goods over the value of 10 grand into that country? It's because we tax it as it leaves. That's number 2. Number 3 is, are they going to bring all of their shitty mega monopolies so that mom and pop stores can finally be competitive again? Fucking go, man. Take your Walmarts and your Amazons out of my fucking country. I cannot wait for you to leave. Go, go, go. Okay, Michael Anthony says, if Dems take back the House and the Senate, what's the first thing you'd like to see them use their power for? Impeachment hearings and other investigations of corruption and criminality in the Trump administration. Zach says, best president in your lifetime? Definitely Obama. If we're judging just by what they've accomplished, I might give it to the Biden administration, but I don't think you can argue that Biden was as good of a president as Obama. I think you could just argue that his administration was more productive and existed at a more progressive time in the country. Danielle says, do you think abortion is murder? I do not personally believe that abortion is murder. But if you do, and you want there to be fewer abortions, you should still vote for the Democratic Party, because Democratic policies actually decrease the number of abortions that happen. Republican policies don't decrease abortions. They actually increase abortions and also make pregnancy more dangerous for women. All right, I got to get out of here. I am well over my time limit. But I just want to thank everybody for being here, for all the questions, for all the engagement, the likes, the shares, the gifts. I'm trying to figure out how I can see who like my top gifters are, but I can't figure out where that information is. But because I always see it like at the end of the live stream, I'll see like these people gave the most, and I would love to thank you guys, as at the end of the show, but I can't ever actually see that metric. But regardless, if you want to support the show financially, you can. There are many ways, there are many mechanisms by which I accept donations. You can send gifts on TikTok. You can send bits on Twitch. You can be a super fan on TikTok. You can be a subscriber on Twitch. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for free. Helps me out a ton, costs you $0. You can also join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. There is a very fun incentive at $10 if you can afford it. Kimberlina, the baby, and the mama are doing great. I'm very pleased with how my ladies are doing in Household Berenstein. If there are any questions that you have when I'm not streaming, please feel free to reach out. Don't be shy. I want to be a resource for you however I can be. Use me and abuse me. You can hit me up in my DMs. DMs are open. You can email me through my website. Link is in the bio. Or you can join my Discord and send me a message there. The Discord is also great. There's a great community there. There's wonderful people. There's recommendations for books and podcasts and civic actions. If you're somebody that wants to help but you don't know how, the Discord channel is a great place to go to. Or if you don't want to even do that, just message me. I want more people doing the work of trying to fix what's going on here. So however I can do that, however I can get you on board with being part of the solution, with doing even 5 minutes of work a week to try to help what's going on, I want to do that. I want to get you in the mix of being part of the solution. So do the work, everybody, and be good to each other. You don't have to be a dick to other people to do the work. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work, so give yourself a break. Step away from politics when you need to. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.